Hello and welcome to your Biography Magazine Mockup project. So what is a mockup? A mockup is a realistic representation of what the product will look like, or a prototype. And this allows you to show the overall appearance aspects of a design, including type choices, color choices, layout, etc. And that's what you're doing here. And you can see here, this is my sample project where I did two different mock-ups of a layout. All right. And your project, you're going to be creating a biography article mock-up layout on a 2-page spread. And by spread, I mean it's 2 pages. This is a spread. This is a single page. This is a spread. All right. So you should have a basic understanding of how to use InDesign from the previous tutorials. You will be making a basic spread using lorem ipsum, which is the mock-up text, and you see I have some here. And you'll be combining this with your knowledge of photography and Photoshop to take photographs of your subject and, photoshopping them, and then using graphic design and typography to create a typeface palette and an appealing layout that represents your subject. So this is all about creating a layout that really represents whoever your subject is. In order for that to happen, there's certain steps that I've laid out. So as always, you're going to be going to the Haiku project tutorial page where it has all the information you could possibly need for this project. Firstly, you have a description of the project and project constraints. So you must have at least 2 photographs in your layout spread. Does not mean you're limited to only 2 photographs, but you must have at least two photographs. You must have one photograph that is a full-length photograph. That means from head to toe, so full length. And you must have another photograph that's a tighter composition, so maybe a headshot. You must have a header and a subheader, so like a header and a subheader. You must use a drop cap. You must use lorem ipsum to put in sample text, and I've given you lots of options here for lorem ipsums to use. And you must have at least 2 versions. This does not mean you'll only have to have 2 versions, but you must have at least 2 versions. So you've picked a partner, you've done your biography interview document, and again, everything is in your project folder. So you've done your biography interview. So let's say this is all done. I've put my person here. I have all these questions I've asked them, and they've answered them for me. So I have a basic idea of my person. Then I'm going to move on to my biography visual research, where again, I go through and I describe who my subject is, what kind of style, what kind of graphic design style would represent them. And I'm going to make a Pinterest board that has 7 to 10 layout inspirations for my magazine layout. And then I am going to watch this tutorial, and I'm going to download the InDesign file, and I'm going to put it into my design folder. And it's a good idea to put all of your files into one folder, because you're going to be linking files, and if everything is disorganized, you're going to have a really hard time working. So it's a good idea to make a folder for this project and then put your file here in there, and here's my sample, and to rename it with your name. And then also it's a good idea in that folder is also to put the photographs that you're going to be using. All right, so those are the steps, and now you're ready to get started. So here is my sample, and you'll see here in the top of the typeface palette, I've put my model. I've put adjectives to define my model's personality. I've picked a header font and a subheader font that I think work, and a body text that also works. So these are 3 different fonts you're using. They can be all within the same typeface family if you would like. Remember, different fonts. You can also look here. I have a resource for you, Font Pair, that pairs Google fonts together. So this could be something that could help you find some fonts that work well together. And then you're going to put this all together. So if you look at the blank document, so this is the one that all of you will be receiving, you'll see that it's empty. You're going to put in this information here, and you're going to put the name of your font here. I want to know what font you're using, and you're going to put the sample header in that font, and the same thing with the sub font. the subheader font, and you're going to make this that font and the body text the same thing. So you can see here, I've done that. So when you put the font name here, also make your header in that font. And this not only is for my reference, but this is also for your reference, so that when you're working, this is a place that you can actually see how your fonts work together before you get started. I want you to come up with your typeface palette before you work on your project. This is the first step. So now you're ready to get started. And at this point, you should have gone through and edited some of your photographs. And the nice thing about using InDesign is that you can import PSD documents, so you don't have to export if you do some edits to a photograph. Like for example, this one, I changed the levels a little bit and brightened it up, and I've done my edits in a PSD document. You can import and place a PSD document into InDesign, so you don't have to worry about exporting as a JPEG. So again, at this point, you've done your typography palette. You want to have edited some of your photographs. You must have a full frame photograph. Full frame, full bleed means edge to edge, edge to edge. I want you to experiment with having edge to edge in each one. Doesn't have to be a specific photograph. It could be just one of them, but I want you to have that in your project. So first of all, let's go through how to add text and how to place your files and all that jazz. So when I'm looking at my project here, and there's a reason why I have a template for you, so that there's a basic layout already made from you. You can see here we have pages. And before we get into that, if your workspace doesn't look like this, just like in Illustrator, just like in Photoshop, you can go to Window, Workspace, and you can change it. Whatever one is preference to you, you can use. Typography might be a better one because we're going to be using typography. Again, you can find one that you particularly like. Maybe book is a little bit more preferential for you. It's really up to you. I don't know. I particularly, I tend to mix and match. And what I tend to do is I tend to use the Workspace like typography, and then I go into Window and I pick out if there's panels in here that I need that I haven't used. Like for example, if I look in the type tools, like glyphs isn't necessarily a panel that's a part of some of these workspaces. I'll pull out glyphs and I'll dock it into my panel. So again, you can play with what workspace works best for you, and it's nice to put in the ones that you use most into the panel here. So you've got it all set up. You've done your typeface palette, and now you're ready to start working. Notice on your page that there's these lines here and these space in between the lines. Now these are the margins, and this is really an important part of making a layout that has a lot of text, like a magazine or a newspaper or something like that. You go to Layout, Margins, and Columns when you're on a particular page. And again, here are the pages, and you can double click to get to the particular page. So this is 2, 3, 4, 5. And again, if you want more pages for your project, so say for example, you've done 2 spreads and you want to do another 2 spreads, you can go down here and go and add more pages. So for example, you'll say, well, there's no guides on this page, or I don't want this many margins here. What you can do is you click on that particular page or pages, and you go to Layout, and you go to Margins and Columns, and here's where you can change the number of columns and the gutter. I don't recommend you really play with the gutter at this point, but you can change the margins. And this is also the columns, and you can also change the margins. At this point, don't worry about the margins. Margins basically mean you don't want any really important elements of your layout, like text, to go past this point. And the columns you can see here. And you can change the number of columns for your layout. So for example, here I'll show you, like, I wanted a 3-column layout, but I might decide I don't want a 3-column. Maybe I want a layout that's 4 columns. So maybe I want 4 columns, or maybe I just want 2 columns. It's really up to you. I want you to play with that as well. All right. And if you're on this page here, you can go to Layout, Margins, and Columns, and you can just add them. So this is up to you. And remember, if you don't see anything, that just means your preview isn't checked. Okay, so that's, the first step, which is margins and columns. The second step is you want to add your text frames and your images. Now, you should have gone over all of this in the basic InDesign tutorials. So remember, you can either just straight up place files, go File, Place, and you can place JPEGs or actually Illustrator files or Photoshop files, File, Place. You can just place it, or you can create a text, a box and place it into the box. So if I go to Miss G Design, Magazine Bio Layout, and I'm going to my photographs that I've edited and crop PSD, I can place this particular image. I can just place it here. That's one way of doing it. And then I can move it around and I can scale it. And this little donut thing, this means you can move around the image within the box. And then we have options up here. So we can fill the frame proportionally, or we can fit content proportionally. These are the two ones you want to work with, because the other ones, fit content to frame, this will distort it, as you see here. Fit frame to content might work if I wanted to resize it like that, and center content might also be useful. But you, generally speaking, don't want to use fit content to frame, because that will sort of distort your image. And this is a way you can also, you got to be careful about what you're selecting. You can sort of crop out parts of your image as well. So these are things to play around with. Other way to do that is you can create a frame to actually place your image into. And you can see how it kind of snaps to the guides. This is also a nice way to add guides by dragging down from the rulers on the left or the right side. So this is something good to also work with. So if you create frames, so you can do the actual layout of putting some of your frames together without having the photos in it first. So here's a frame, and here you can go File, Place, and you can actually place it into there. So you can see here it places in there, and you want to move around the photo within the frame. You just click on the little donut looking thing and you move it around. And there's the options here that you can also work with. So I can fill frame proportionally, and that just moves it down, and fit frame to content. So those are lots of options for you to play with. Again, I want you to have one version that's full bleed. That means edge to edge. And again, you want to make sure that you've actually selected the frame box and not the actual image. So that's actually how you place the images. And again, you're not limited to only using two, but you have to use at least two. Now, in terms of the text, here is the text tool. You can play around with the type on a path tool. Again, this is similar to Illustrator, but to create a general type box, you can either just click or you can drag. And at this point, I want you to actually put in your mock-up text. And here are some of the mock-up generators. So there's a lot of fun options for you. Lorem Ipsum generators. So you find your fonts, and here's your Lorem Ipsum generators. I use Cupcake Ipsum in mine, but you can use Cat Ipsum or Batman Ipsum or whatever you want. These are just your placeholder texts. So you'll generate these, and then you just copy and paste it in here. So copy and paste. All right. So that's how you add sort of your placeholder text. And again, you're going to have a header and a subheader. So again, I'm going to draw out my header. Miss G is awesome. So it's good to write your header and your subheader. I think that since you've interviewed someone, you can actually figure that out for yourself and just make something up. So once you actually have your elements, you can start playing around with it. And this is where your sample header and sample subheader are good to have. So, for example, if I did two versions and I wanted to do two more versions here, my next step would be I would do margins and columns. Let's say I want this one to be 2 columns. And you see if you have just one of the pages selected, it will add just the columns to that page. So I've added my, I've added my placer text. I'm just going to copy this over here and place it onto this one. And you'll notice here, like, if you see this little plus sign, that just means that your text is overset, that it's running past there. You don't have to worry about that in your placeholder text. But if that becomes a problem with your header and your subheader, that just means you either need to make the font smaller or you need to make the box bigger. So now that you've actually started having these placeholder parts of your image, I'm going to copy and just paste this here. And I'm going to just copy this and place this here so I can show you what I was working with. So once you sort of have all your elements together, then you start playing around with putting things around. You can have backgrounds, so like you could add sections to your thing that are backgrounds. Again, here are all the options. They're very similar to Illustrator. You can add stroke and width and all that kind of stuff. Swatches, I can make things colored and tints. And just like in Illustrator, there's the layout, so you can arrange, send to back. If you're feeling really fancy, you can play with the layers. Yeah, so you can play around with adding images. There's a pen tool, there's line tools, there's lots of tools for you to play around with. I do want you indeed to have images and the sample text. And now once you add your actual text, how do you change, the fonts and all that kind of stuff? Well, here's character, and here's where you could change your font. And it's the same thing as Illustrator once you start typing. So if I start typing Lado, it then will pop up and it's changed it. 12 point is a nice point to have for your body text. And then you'll notice, there's no spacing between my paragraphs. You go to paragraph, and right here, you notice if you hover over it, space before, you can play with this and make some space before the paragraph. You can decide if you want to hyphenate or not. And then if you select just the first letter, here is where you can create your drop cap, which I want you to just play with because it's something that we kind of forget to use in our design sometimes. So those are different things that you can play around with. Again, text frame and different guides and all that kind of stuff. There are certain basic elements that you need to have, but I really want you to play around with the tools and the tools that you have here. Remember, it's very similar to Illustrator in terms of layers and the stroke and fill colors, and the difference is that there's pages and the way that the pages work are slightly different, and that you place the items in here. But again, you should have a basic understanding, and this is all about playing around with using this tool. Once you're done, and you're like, again, this is not really done, but say this was done, and I've done 3 different versions, and I have my typeface palette. When I'm all done, again, I'm going to save, and then I'm going to go to File, and I'm going to go to Export, or you can go to Adobe PDF Presets and go High Quality Print. And this is just a PDF, and then you're going to click Save, and you want to click Spreads, and then you want to click Export. Overset text, like I said, just means that the text is going past the text box. There's text that's not in the text box. Again, you don't have to worry about that because this is just our mock-up document. All right, and then just like always, you're going to take that final piece, which this time is a PDF and not a JPEG, and you're going to take this and you're going to upload it to your Google Drive. And you can see here the reason why you had to click Spreads is that I want to see your document, how it would look on a magazine. So a spread, when you export spreads, I don't want single pages because you've designed it as a 2-page spread, and I want to actually see that. So that's your project. That's what you're going to be doing. Again, this is your first big project using InDesign, so go back to the other InDesign tutorials if you're having some problems, but that's the basic gist of this project.